Hey, Steven, how does it feel to be fully aligned right now?
It feels great.
Psychos, sickos, and Michiganders unite for a breaking news edition of the PHNX Suns podcast. I'm Eric, that's Steven. We got the freckled Mamba behind the Mac making all of the magic happen. And the Phoenix Suns have a brand new head coach and Cavaliers assistant coach Jordan Ott. He was selected over Johnny Bryant to replace Mike Budenholzer, according to Shams Charania, who also follows up and says that Jordan Ott got the Devin Booker stamp of approval. We are going to break it all down right here on a breaking news edition of PHNX Suns. We will also be live at 3 o'clock later today, so don't you miss that either. Shout out to Zeke, Alston, Purcell, Drew, Joe, so many of our friends funneling in here for some breaking Suns news. Steven, we have waited a long time for this coaching search to wrap up. We finally got a name. It is Jordan Ott. What are your instant reactions to the newest Phoenix Suns head coach?
I think that it is very much aligned with the progressive approach to coaching that I've been anticipating and hoping that they would choose a coach from the field of names that they were looking at. Jordan is certainly someone that's been a part of one of the more progressive team constructs, yet alone with the Cleveland Cavaliers this past season, and played a hefty kind of role within all of that change that they had. And it wasn't just a one-stop shop for change. It was a gradual kind of integration of change over time, culminating in a historic season that the Cleveland Cavaliers saw in 2024-25.
You know, I don't want to do Jordan Ott a disservice, and I think we've done a good job of explaining to people that he is a very qualified candidate to be the next Phoenix Suns head coach. He's been an assistant coach for over a decade now, starting in 2013 with Mike Budenholzer's Atlanta Hawks as a video coordinator. Kind of ironic, full circle. We can maybe get to that more later. But yes, he did start at Michigan State. He was the men's basketball manager at Penn State for his undergrad, went and did grad school at Michigan State, got his master's there, and of course was a video coordinator for the Spartans. Steven, we have to talk about it. I don't think that you can ignore it. But does the Michigan State ties, does that worry you? Or is this a different situation to you than what happened with Brian Gregory?
So I'll preface with there is going to be some sort of criticism at some point, regardless. I think naturally with it being more of an elephant in the room because there's commonality amongst multiple decisions made on multiple significant roles with everything that the Suns are trying to transition to going forward. Naturally, inevitably, yes, it's going to be something that continues to come up. But people are going to pick something to criticize anyway. It's just a lot more easy of a target when it's this versus something else that probably takes a little bit more work to get to, because needless to say, the low-hanging fruit is what's often reached for more often than not. So that's inevitable, but it's all about what are they going to actually do in terms of production and getting things back aligned to what aligns with a playoff level team.
Yeah, I will say this. I don't blame Suns fans who are wary or upset about the Michigan State ties. You know, especially when you preach this change, right? Oh, we're going to change things. And then you say, oh, well, we're going to change it to Michigan State. And your first hire, and this sets up Ott badly, is Brian Gregory, who would not get a job with any other front office based off of resume and experience. It's completely different with Jordan Ott, and it's unfair to lump those two in the same category. Now, it's interesting, and it's definitely something to keep your eye on, as almost every major decision maker on the Phoenix Suns comes from the state of Michigan. Even Devin Booker has ties there as well. But Jordan Ott was in contention to be the Charlotte Hornets head coach the last coaching cycle last summer before that job eventually went to Charles Lee. Like I mentioned, he's been an assistant coach for over a decade now beyond Atlanta, was an assistant with the Brooklyn Nets through 3 different tenures, including Kevin Durant's tenure there with Kenny Atkinson, Jock Vaughn, and Steve Nash. Jumped over to LA under Darvin Ham, and then this most recent year being with Cleveland. But again, I don't blame people for preferring Johnny Bryant over Jordan Ott simply because it would prove that the MSU ties don't mean anything. But when you mentioned your first response, Stephen, you said you're excited about this modern offensive and defensive approach to basketball that the Cavaliers adopted. What are some of the biggest specific philosophies that you hope you see implemented on the Phoenix Suns next year with Jordan Ott?
Start with the defensive end and allowing for the team's identity, although Devin Booker's individual identity aligns with offense, starting with their defense being that what they're leaning into more. And what I'm saying by that is, can they form a team that's a monster on the margins? A team that's not going to be consistently, if ever, out-rebounded. A team that's going to find ways to get the second chance opportunities that might come up. A team that's going to create points in an unscripted manner that come from the activity and the versatility and the depth that they can play with across multiple lineups on the defensive end. That starts with the center position in particular, which ties into news that we spoke to yesterday about the Suns wanting a starting caliber center should a Kevin Durant trade surface, and them pretty much speaking to that in particular with the teams that they are talking with as far as trades go. So being able to figure out that side of the basketball, having a foundation and then versatility baked into all of that on that end, which naturally lends itself into points being scored in a process that starts with the defensive end first and then transition into the offensive side, versatility on defense, versatility on offense. But what does the spacing look like? Are players just standing around watching each other like in many respects they were in seasons past? Or is there a dynamic to their spacing where it's not just that we have shooters and they're spaced around? What are you making defenses do? Are you making them pay? Are you opening up space to create opportunity for Devin Booker to not have to go up against a set defense all the time? Also, are you able to get enough buy-in out of Devin Booker to where you can put him off the ball and kind of add more nuance and layers to your offense than the things you went up against the grain with last season? All of that versatility in the scheme and lineup on defense, as well as being more nuanced on offense, I think will lend itself to a more evolved, a more progressive style of play from the Suns.
I know we joke about the alignment thing, and I think understandably so. It's just such a fun buzzword that they repeat it over and over again. But I do like how in Brian Gregory's introductory press conference, he talked about how the NBA is shifting to not so small philosophies, specifically mentioning the double big philosophy. Stephen, who was a team that found a lot of success in running those double big lineups?
That would be the Cleveland Cavaliers.
It would be the Cleveland Cavaliers. And when you look at the positional needs that the Suns have, what Matt Moore reported yesterday, what we've talked about ad nauseum on this show, whether through tiers, whether through our free agent talk, whether through our draft talk, is the Suns need another big man. The Suns might need 2 other big men, and they don't want to be rebounded. They don't want to be out toughed. And that's the type of thing where at least there's a plan, right? At least they didn't say, hey, we want to run double big lineups and we want to do this, and then go out there and hire somebody who treats offense like Mike D'Antoni. And I love Mike D'Antoni, right? And I love the 7 seconds or less offense. But if you sat down and you told people that you wanted to do one thing, and then you went and hired somebody that's completely different just because he went to Michigan State, then I think you could start poking holes in this. But Jordan Ott does align with these things. Plus, I do wonder what Jordan Ott's player relationship side of it all is as well, because, you know, in our trending mini pod, Stephen, that we did the other day about this, I talked about how, yeah, the coaching philosophies are important, right? Having modern offensive approaches, being locked in on defense, being able to throw a double big and to adjust on the fly and make adjustments in the playoffs and whatever it is, right? That's all the foundation of what makes a coach good. But what makes a coach great is how do you relate to the players? Because where did we see the failures of the last 3 Phoenix Suns head coach, Stephen?
With player relations, especially with the top end of the roster in particular.
Yeah, and the top end of the roster, whether you like it or not, is the most important one. And we'll get to how Devin Booker was involved here in a second, as we appreciate everybody joining us here live on a breaking news edition of PHNX Sun. So many of you in here. Make sure you smash that like button and come back and hang out with us at 3 o'clock later today. But when you have a coach who's good at basketball, that's one thing, or good at coaching basketball, that's one thing, right? Frank Vogel, and we saw it based off statistics wise, especially on the defense, was able to cobble together a pretty good performance out of that roster. But he didn't have the stars. He didn't have the locker room. How is Jordan Ott going to be able to handle that is my question, because part of the reason why I personally leaned Johnny Bryant, Steven, and I know he was also your choice to be the next coach of the Suns, was because we heard a lot of great things about his relationships with players on his roster, including star players, like when he was on the Knicks and he coached Julius Randle and how fond Julius Randle was of him. I'm not going to make any, disparaging, remarks about what Jordan Ott can do in that department, because we just don't know. But to me, Steven, that's the number one thing that I need Jordan Ott to be good at, is how are you managing these player relations?
Yeah, for sure. And I think as I get to have more conversations with people that are in these positions and obviously observe from a distance with people like Jordan Ott and Johnny Bryant, et cetera, that are doing a great job and being lauded for that, I think that coaches that have a skill development background that ascend up the ranks to assistant coach that's in charge of scouting and things like that, to then being borderline lead assistant coaches and ultimately climbing all the way up to the top of that ladder as a head coach, there's experience compiled at each one of those stops that allows for you to be as well-rounded and relatable as possible to your fellow coaches, which we'll get to in a minute as far as who he's may potentially be looking at as far as assistance goes. But overarching point for me with that, skill development guys that have that background as their foundation, they have a different type of personability to them to where they're able to reach in maybe non-basketball sense, the human side of things, understanding these individuals, being able to reach and connect with them to then be able to ask and get more out of them. I think that because he has that background, and to be great as the skill development guy, you have to get guys to individually buy into what you're preaching, to be criticized and then held accountable. And I think that, again, him having that as his foundation in multiple stops, it just puts him in a perfect position to implement all of his learnings over time with the Suns. The challenge and the opportunities are ahead, but I feel like they have someone that's as well-versed in each of those stops as they could possibly ask for.
Chicken Hag Greasy in the chat, which is an all-time chat name. I don't know if I've seen you around here before.
Nah,
Chicken Hag Greasy. But stick around. We would love to continue to be able to say the words Chicken Hag Greasy. Ask a very simple question. Says, are you happy about it? I'll be honest with you. I wouldn't say I'm necessarily happy about it. Now, I'm not doomsday like a lot of people are, and I'm not saying that Matt is the worst owner of all time for hiring somebody with Michigan State ties. Yeah, I don't feel nearly as bad about this as I do after the Brian Gregory hire. And I do think Jordan Ott's going to be a good head coach. I actually do have faith in that. That's not just a Phoenix Suns thing. He's been in contention for other head coaching jobs. And, he's been a guy who's well respected around the league. So am I happy with it? This wasn't my choice. So I would say no. I would have been happier with Johnny Bryant. But I will say this, I'm not mad at it. I'm not upset at it. I think the main thing for me is I just got to give this guy some time and see how he actually does. He's a complete unknown quantity, but he's earned more of a benefit of a doubt than Brian Gregory based off of his track record. But what about you, Steven? Are you happy about it?
No, but that's no indictment against him, because even if it was Johnny Bryant, or even if it was my ultimate pick, which was Sam Cassell, I wasn't going to be any more than content with whoever it was they might decide to be their head coach going forward. So I'm content with it, and that's not more or less anything I would have been with most of the other coaches that were in this field, because I have all of my attention squared, and now it shifts directly to this faction of the Suns. That's Brian Gregory and company. You have your coach. You have someone that you have all of these ties to and ties with that precede your time with the Suns. How is that going to factor into you all moving on the same accord as far as building a roster that puts him in the best position to coach to the best of his abilities and get the most out of a roster? And is that going to come in a way that helps to expedite your retool? Or is it going to be a stagnated process that has ups and downs, ebbs and flows, and it takes longer than it probably should? That's where the challenge is for me. I'm glad we can shift our attention there after we get done, obviously, speaking to everything today.
I will say this. I am happy. I agree with you there. I'm happy that we are done with this. I was very tired of talking about like 15 assistant coaches a week, dude. I can't do that anymore. Much love to all the assistant coaches, but we don't know what the hell most of you do. So it definitely was like, oh, what about Sean Sweeney? What about Steve Hetzel? What about Dave Bliss? Right. I'm happy, and I know this sounds really upsetting maybe or mean, but I am happy that it wasn't David Fizdale. And that might just be unfair to David Fizdale based off of the situation the Suns presented, but this could not have been an internal hire. I'm upset that it wasn't Chris Quinn. You know, Chris Quinn was the guy who was at the top of the list for me. You got to start wondering, what does that guy have to do to be a head coach in the NBA? He's been in the last couple of cycles, and he feels like he checks every box, didn't even make it to the final round. I think Dave Bliss was somebody I wasn't exactly super high on. And when Jordan Ott and Johnny Bryant were the final two names that were put out there, you know, it made sense to me. It also was a little bit of an FU to Dan Gilbert and the Cavaliers. There is, of course, the Devin Booker side of things as well. And according to Shams Charania, Devin Booker sat in on the final round of interviews and gave Jordan Ott his stamp of approval. Steven, we have talked multiple times now since the initial reports came out that Devin Booker was involved in the coaching search and saying this was the right thing to do. And in fact, this was very good for the Suns to do. How do you feel about the next head coach getting Devin Booker's stamp of approval?
Well, especially considering that even with the field of coaches that they were choosing from, I generally respect the ambiguity that comes with that, because there's just a multitude of information that they have, that they're privy to, that we simply aren't. Even if we do as many searches as we possibly can, we don't have the connections that they have. We can't get the same intel and information that they can, obviously. That being said, and that being brought into context, yes, I'm glad that he was heavily involved, and I respect that he feels like that's a coach that can get the most out of him, but also get the most out of the resources around him to get the most out of the team and the franchise as a whole. And it feels like that's the mindset that they're working with. I feel like they're aligned there. And I feel like if they can continue to stay that way and move forward and stay in that specific connection, they can get to where they ultimately want to get to sooner than people expect. But again, like I prefaced last time, the work is just now getting started as you get more clarity.
The work is just now getting started for everybody involved. This is a big year for Matt Ishbia. This is a big year for Brian Gregory. I mean, you've got a
for Devin Booker too.
Big year for Devin Booker, big year for Jordan Ott. You know, as much as we want to go into this next season talking about, oh, well, you're not going to have the same expectations, right? You're not going to have these championship level expectations that you've had, presumably because Kevin Durant will be off the roster, presumably because Bradley Beal will be off the roster, either waive and stretch or you trade assets with him, which either way, you're not setting yourself up to compete after that. As much as we talk about how this upcoming season will not have the same amount of pressure on it for the Phoenix Suns as a whole, when you start breaking it down entity to entity, there is a lot on the line for everybody, including Devin Booker. And that's why Devin Booker needed to be involved in this, right? If you want to sit back and you want to debate whether or not Devin Booker is quote unquote good enough to build your franchise around, I'll let you go back and debate that. Me personally, I'm all aboard with it. If Book is happy with it, somebody said it in chat, then I'm happy with it. You know, you can acknowledge that Devin Booker is not a top 5 player in this league. I think at his peak, he can get up to close to top 5, more around top 10. And this past season, he had a down year. I mean, statistically, it was fine, but eye test wise, defensive wise, it was the worst year of his prime. You're still building around that guy. He's your franchise all-time leader in points. He took your franchise farther in the playoffs than anybody ever has. Stars want to come play here because of Devin Booker. And if you want to debate about building around him, that's one thing. You also have to look at reality, which is both sides have come out and committed to building long-term in Phoenix. The Suns have committed to Devin Booker, and Devin Booker is committed to the Suns. And if you don't involve this guy in your coaching search, and the next head coach doesn't have his stamp of approval, which from what we've heard the last couple of times felt like it was not Book's choice, you're doing him a disservice and you're doing yourself a disservice. But now, Steven, you go to Devin Booker and you say, this is your team. You know, you're the main guy. You're the star. This is the head coach that you gave the stamp of approval for. It's now your time to go and to step up and to make good on what these past couple of seasons have been, at least on an individual perspective.
Yep. And again, if you're talking about generating buy-in and having a tone set from the top that veers all the way to the bottom, you can't say, Devin Booker, we're giving you the keys to our franchise, and also not give him all of the keys to the franchise. It doesn't work that way. If he's not involved in some capacity, whatever capacity you might agree that is, or if you feel like he maybe should or shouldn't have, that's up for speculation, but he had to be involved in some capacity with this. And the fact that he was aligns with everything that they've been saying the past month and a half. And it feels like they're moving forward with much more concision and cohesion than they did in the past couple of seasons.
Yeah, and you can debate. Some people are saying, is Book top 15? Is Book top 10? As an offensive engine in the NBA, somebody who could be top 10 in points and top 10 in assists, you could build a team around that. You could build a good team around that. And I do believe you could build a championship contender around Book. Again, not too far off from being the 1A or the 1B if you're a big Chris Paul fan in the 2021 NBA Finals. It's all about the team building around him, right? And you see that with OKC, you see that with Indiana, right? And I think Indiana specifically is a good way to look at, you know, they don't have a lot of non-first round picks, non-lottery picks on that roster, right? But they also didn't have a top 5 player in the league. I mean, Tyrese Halliburton at his peak can maybe operate near there. He can operate as maybe the best point guard in the league, but I don't think you put him in the same category as a Giannis or a Jokic or a Luka or even an SGA at this point either from an individual talent perspective. But you have the right coach in Steve Carlisle. You have the right roster construction as far as Miles Turner, Pascal Siakam, Andrew Nembhard, Aaron Nesmith, TJ McConnell, Obi Toppin. I mean, you just have hits after hit after hit after hit on the margins. And you got a good fan base around you, which the Suns do have when they're winning. And even when they're not, we know the psychos, the sickos, the diehards who tune in here every day, who care more about this team than anything else. Like, there is a recipe for success here to build around Devin Booker. I don't blame them for going to the super team route. I don't blame them for hiring former championship winning head coaches, Steven. But now it's time for a new direction. And it finally feels like they have it. Whether or not you're comfortable in it, though, is a completely different conversation.
Yeah, for sure. And that's the challenge and opportunity ahead. And I continue to say challenge and opportunity because it's not just one or the other. I feel like it's both of those two. Y'all bring up great points when bringing up the Indiana Pacers, because who was it that won the player of the series in the Eastern Conference? Pascal Siakam. Yeah. Correct. Is he the franchise player? Nope.
No.
He's a player that they just recently got via trade last season, actually. And my point in bringing that up is roster construct is important, because no number one player is going to just go out and take a team to the finals. It's going to take a 1B or a number 2 that can punch up to that 1B or potentially be a number 1 in a series based off of what an opponent is, presenting to you. Obviously, we'll see Indiana be tested in ways that they maybe haven't been yet with Oklahoma City in the finals, but that also goes in turn with Oklahoma City, because one of the main reasons why they didn't make the finals last season was because of the development of Jalen Williams. He wasn't quite where he needed to be for them to get to where they wanted to get to and where their roster suggested that they could. So we're talking about all of these number 1 players, a Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, a Tyrese Halliburton, people would say that those 2 players have been borderline top 10, obviously Shai being top of the top, being the MVP this season. But looking at those roster constructs, you have to pay attention to the way that those pieces fit together, them having multiple pieces, not just one, but multiple pieces that can punch up, and ultimately how they fit around that number 1 player. If they nail the margins, to your point, they can find themselves in a similar position if they do that work and do it diligently.
You absolutely can. We had Tim Legler on a couple of weeks ago, and Tim Legler was saying that he thinks the path to being a competitive team again is not as long of a one as many people think. And I totally get it. I totally understand that, people want to just get turned around immediately. People want to also feel the despair and think that, oh, well, it's impossible. They're screwed. They have no assets. Kevin Durant, Bradley Beal, what's going to happen with them? The Suns have no path forward. It's just not true. You have a blueprint, right? It's put athletic wings and athletic players around Devin Booker. The goal is not to compete for a championship this year. I'm not going to put that on them, especially if they trade Kevin Durant. The goal is to be fun. The goal is to be competitive. And if you think Jordan Ott is the guy to help establish a culture to get the type of players that you want to play the way that you want over the next couple of years to build up and eventually be a championship level head coach, then that's what you do. That's what you roll with. You're not trying to hit the fast forward button on the Phoenix Suns anymore. You tried, you press the all-in button, you put all your chips in the middle of the table and you went broke. Right now it's time to start saving again. It's time to start chipping away and getting back to this point where maybe you can cash in later and compete for a championship. But right now, build around Devin Booker, make a fun, competitive team, install a culture. And I do think eventually down the line, another star is going to want to come here. There was a question in the chat. I think it was J-Rock saying, do you really think stars still want to come to Phoenix? Absolutely. I just think that you have to prove that the infrastructure of this organization is better than what it's been the last couple of years.
Yep. And the point I was going to make with Devin Booker is also a point that comes into question or consideration rather for external players looking at Phoenix. With Devin Booker, the fact that we're not speaking on hypotheticals and that there's a literal proof of concept across multiple years and in one specific year where it hit as well as it ever has with Devin Booker as the best player, they don't get to the 2021 finals without him being the type of player that he grew to be throughout that playoff showing, his very first playoff showing of his career. So there's proof of concept that he can be a piece that's leading a team to the championship round. That's not hypothetical. That's quite literally what happened. And it would happen up against multiple instances of adversity over the course of that playoffs too. Take that in terms of the proof of concept and apply it to why free agents might want to come to Phoenix. For one, it's because they know that Devin Booker is an elite level talent that has shown to be a playoff riser, not a player that stays the same or drops off. He's a 16-game player. He gets better as the pressure kind of multiplies over the course of the season. And then the last bit with the proof of concept, you have it with Booker. Now it's on everybody else in these decision-making positions to kind of get that same type of lens that they're looked through as well. Can you show that, okay, this group of guys, they have a shared vision that they're executing upon, and it's clear that the pieces that they're putting around Devin Booker are complementary to him, but also complementary to the identity that they preach that they want to play to. If those things are all fitting together and they stay #aligned, that's going to be an attraction for other people to see that there is proof of concept, that they're not just talking, they're not just lip service, they're actually 10 toes down about these things that they're speaking about, and it's exemplified through their daily habits, and we're seeing those results start to come to fruition, obviously after the season gets going and whatnot.
Yeah, I like what TJ says in the chat. Says the goal is to show that you're ascending, right?
Mm-hmm.
You need to be a destination. You can't win a championship just with Devin Booker. He can't be your lone player on that level. That's just not how championships work. Nobody does that in the NBA currently. Nope. Not the Celtics, not the Bucks when they beat the Suns. Maybe the Denver Nuggets.
Nope. Not even Denver, because Jamal Murray stepped up multiple times and Aaron Gordon turned into one of the best role players in the entire NBA.
But I would say Denver is the closest thing to a team that doesn't have a second star player that we've seen win a championship. They just happen to have the best player in the world. And Devin Booker is not the best player in the world. Some people think that we talk about him like he's the best player in the world, but he's not. He's one of the best players in the world. He is, I think, at worst, a top 15 player in this league. And I still say that after this past season. And he needs to be fully bought in, and he needs to be better for this team. But overall, the alignment, if we want to keep talking about that, has to be where it needs to be. Let's read a couple super chats here, then reset here. We're about 30 minutes in on a breaking news edition of PHNX Suns. Thank you all so much for filing in here on a Wednesday morning. We will be live again at 3 o'clock later today. We'll be picking up the pieces of this coaching hire. Plus, we'll be talking about the NBA draft and what if the Suns trade up in the lottery, who could they target, especially if they get that 10th pick back. So if you're a Suns fan and you're new around here, we do this live every single day at 3 o'clock on on PHNX Sports. Hit that subscribe button. Let's go ahead and take a look at some super chats here. Psycho Blue with a $5 super chat. Thank you so much to our diehard Psycho Blue. Says, Basketball Cthulhu hopes Jordan Ott at least attempts to come up with a system versus Bud, whose system was, I don't know, you tell me. GM got to build the roster now.
What are your thoughts on that?
Listen, I was all in on the Mike Budenholzer hire, which is why me not being all in on the Jordan Ott hire, I don't think is the end of the world. And Mike Budenholzer is maybe the worst coach I've ever seen with my two eyes. And it was bad. I think career-wise, Bud is great. I think the Phoenix Suns is a very big stain on his resume because it really felt like there was no philosophy. It really felt like there was no anything defensively, offensively. Oh, we're going to shoot more threes, but then we're not going to shoot as much threes. Oh, no, there's nothing. And if Jordan Ott can come in here and put together a basic, modern offensive and defensive system, he's already miles better than whatever Mike Budenholzer did. And as long as Jordan Ott doesn't unceremoniously ice some of your best players in the rotation that are part of the reason why you're winning, he's automatically better than Mike Budenholzer. I genuinely think if Jordan Ott was coaching this team last year, and I'm being dead serious, if Jordan Ott was coaching this team last year, I'm not saying they would have been good, but damn it, they would have made the play-in. They might have snuck in at a 6th seed. And that's more my indictment on Mike Budenholzer than it would be praising Jordan Ott, who I don't know a ton about. But my Lord, Mike Budenholzer's lack of system, lack of leadership, lack of, relationships with star players just crippled this team last year.
Yeah, I mean, it's impossible to disagree with that. And I mean, especially if you spent the entire season criticizing or desiring to see more from specific things. Like even some of the things that I spoke to in the preseason last year, like there's challenges ahead that Bud is going to have to answer. And the fact that most, if not none of those things got answered in a sustainable manner with all of the top end talent that this team had, a roster that was constructed and that he was picked off merits of alignment with. You're an offensive minded coach. You've shown to have these offensive principles. And even those principles foundationally that made you a championship winning coach were never even implemented in a sustained manner, nor did they get the buy-in from the players on the roster from the top end in particular, which led to inconsistencies with all of the role players. And that's just the offensive end. The defensive end, there was just simply no plan. So again, the bar is the floor in terms of being better than what preceded Jordan Ott. So I can't even expect to gauge him based off of what preceded him the past season, if not the last season and a half. He's coming in with a fresh slate for me, and I'm assessing him based off of consistency, seeing what it is that kind of stands out early on. Does he have the buy-in? Does he have the ear of certain guys, the younger guys in particular? How does Devin Booker help to set that tone that he's hoping to set with the team as well? Little things like that once the ball gets rolling into training camp.
Yeah, I don't think you're going to be able to write the book on Jordan Ott after one season, but I certainly think you're going to need a couple months to really get a grip on what he's going to do. And, that brings me to another point. Psycho Blue says GM got to build the roster now. That is 100% correct. They also need to give this guy some room to breathe. Okay. This is your 4th head coach in as many years. Right. You fired Monty Williams. You fired Frank Vogel after 1 year. You fired Mike Budenholzer after 1 year. And now you're hiring Jordan Ott. And Jordan Ott might be being put in a pretty tough situation, right? He might be walking into something that isn't ideal for a first-time head coach, right? A changing roster, a superstar in the middle of his prime, or a star, if some people have a problem with me saying that, with Devin Booker, who is going to try to compete for championships. Ideally, if you walked into the Phoenix Suns right now, you say, what do you want to do as a team? The answer is go compete to win a championship, right? Even though that's not where they actually are right now. But you know that those expectations are not a long time down the road. Like, you're not signing a deal with the Wizards, the Hornets, the Jazz, a team that you know is going to take an OKC-style approach to rebuilding for the next couple of years, right? You need to give this guy time. Even if this season is not what you want it to be, you cannot fire Jordan Ott after this season. I'm talking 3 to 4 years. Like, this guy needs time to grow. He needs time to establish himself, to figure out what type of head coach he wants to be. And whether you like it or not, that's the situation you've put yourself in, Matt Ishbia. You cannot be rash and move on from this guy after a year. No more fired coaches until late 2020s, please.
Yeah, they're locked in, and it has to start again. If you want to get the most out of the coach, you have to facilitate a roster that's going to allow for him to be his best self. So I'm glad they're getting it done so early in the process, because now that allows for them to hopefully get ahead of the schedule as far as what decisions are going to be made with the Bradley Beal contract. What can be done? What will they be able to execute? Obviously, the Kevin Durant situation after that. Having your head coach already established and having somebody there's familiarity with, whether it be in a literal sense or just from where you all have kind of stemmed from, should hopefully help for that shared vision part that I continue to speak to. And those things should kind of help them maybe expedite the process at which they're operating with. Instead of having to learn each other, there's already familiarity, so you can kind of hit the ground running there.
Yeah, Mark says, Eric, what if they look like they have no plan on offense or defense, or Booker doesn't buy in? Do we still stick with Ott? It's such a catch-22, right? Because if it looks like that, then pretty clear that you suck at hiring head coaches, huh? And do you really just want to just fire this guy and go hire another one and pay him out? Like, if he sucks this year, that puts you in a really tough situation. And I think you still stick it out with him. I think you still give him a couple of years to see if he can figure it out. And that sucks. I don't think that there's a right answer there. You could fire him and move on and try to hire somebody else, but you can't afford to do that anymore. And so if that does happen, if Book doesn't buy in, if the offense and the defense isn't there, then that's a really tough situation to be in. And it's definitely on the table, Steven. And you just hope that, beyond the Michigan State stuff, that this was the right hire for the Suns, and that if there are clear weaknesses, if there are clear detriments to this team, it's not all encompassing to a point of no redeemable qualities in Jordan Ott.
Yeah, and I think this is a nice point to mention, that just because a team maybe isn't playing to the level that you might expect them to, or that the general expectation might be, doesn't always mean that the coaching is at fault, nor does that always mean that the coaching is bad. Sometimes it's just a lack of execution from the group. Now, obviously, there could be multiple reasons why, but to just say bad coach or bad team equals bad coach it's just not true, nor is it fair to the context that you're assessing. So I want to make sure we kind of preface with that point. That being said, I just don't see a way in which Jordan Ott is able to, or not able to, have one side of the ball stamped as an identity. And I feel like those days are starting now, from everything that they're doing to build out his assistant coaching staff, to build out his brain trust, to insulate him if he's a defensive-minded coach, insulate him with offensive-minded coaches to offset that and create balance and allow for things to not get lost where, okay, this guy's not doing his job because he's on this side of the ball, and vice versa, with things that feel like took place over the last season in particular. I just don't see a way in which he isn't able to stamp identity on one side in particular. But again, my overarching point continues to shift to the front office. Are you going to put players on this roster that allows for him to align with the identity and therefore get the most out of his team and start to show a process and have a proof of concept that he's working off of?
Yeah, driving and delivering, who's in here a decent amount of times. Appreciate you driving and delivering. Says, isn't 4 coaches in 4 years already saying they don't know how to hire the right guy? Yeah, and that's why you can't afford to fire this guy after 1 year, right? And I also think that's why Matt Ishbia does not care about the Michigan State thing. Matt Ishbia does not care about what other people think about this hire. Whether you like it or not, he's doing what he thinks is right. And I don't think it's just the MSU thing. There has to be more than that. So it's a little against the grain of what they did before, of going for the former championship winning head coaches. You're going with the first time head coach, a complete unknown quantity in the head coaching realm, but you're also having Brian Gregory lead the search as well. This is a big test for him. There's a lot of really great points in the chat, and I do appreciate everybody who's checking in with us here on a Wednesday. We'll talk about the staff that we think Jordan Ott could put together. Could he steal Johnny Bryant? Maybe David Fizdale. Is David Fizdale going to stay around? We're going to get to that in a second. We're going to keep reading your super chats here, but hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. Over 400 of you in here on a Wednesday morning. That is special for the psychos and sickos. Thank you all so much for hanging out with us here. Mark also with a super chat, $2 super chat. Thank you so much. Mark says, what's next? Ford for arena sponsor? Lansing Suns soon. Are you surprised our G League team isn't in Michigan?
No, I'm not surprised.
I don't know what the next sponsor would be for what is now PHX Arena or what should be PHNX Arena, but it would be really funny if it was a company with Michigan ties. Like at that point, it would actually be a bit, and I think I'd start laughing. Okay,
that would be funny, but I'm just ready to move past the whole Michigan thing.
I hear you. Be calm, see clearly. Hello, Be Calm, see clearly with a $2 super chat. Now, be calm. I know that you haven't been around as much lately. I have some bad news for you. Noah is no longer producing the show. We have the wonderful freckled Mamba who you're going to get to know, Ayrton. So Ayrton eventually will read your super chats. I'm going to read this one today, but I just want to let you know that your hubby, Be Calm, is gone. But Be Calm, see clearly says, outside of Booker, I hate this team. But I love you guys. Heart emoji. We appreciate you. Be Calm, see clearly. And I understand why people are not excited about this hire. We do have Hunter, though, with a $9.99 super chat. Thank you so much, Hunter. Says, thank you both for the coverage. You're welcome. Says, posted this in Discord, but I want people to understand we didn't skip over the most surefire coach of all time for the team manager at MSU. Ott is qualified.
Very qualified. In fact, it's been qualified for so long, to Eric's point, that he's been involved in multiple head coaching searches that preceded this one with the Suns. And obviously all of the opinions that people are basing whether they bring him in a coaching search off of are consistent, and they span across multiple different coaching situations that he's been with. So his resume speaks for itself for anybody that's willing to look past the low-hanging fruit of Michigan State. So yeah. I would advise just kind of giving him time to show his worth and ultimately assessing off of what he does in this situation instead of the honestly played out and lazy Michigan State thing at this point.
Yeah, Bees with a $2 super chat says, we ought to be patient with this hire.
Bees, that was very hello of you, but I'll accept it.
It was very, very hello. But you know what? I want to be cautiously optimistic about Jordan Ott. You know, I think that I've been so negative about everything Suns related for the last, I don't know, year plus at this point. You know, or at least since the season started, it's been a lot of negativity. I'm not going to go out here and say that Jordan Ott was my choice to be the next Suns head coach. I'm not going to go out here and say that I think he's going to be the greatest head coach of all time, but I do think there's potential and I do think there's promise. One of the last things we'll talk about here, Steven, is the staff that we want Jordan Ott to put together, and then we'll wrap up and we'll be back at 3:00 for another show. So make sure you tune in for that. We'll be in studio for that show. Who would you like to see on the first-time head coach Jordan Ott's bench as an assistant coach for him?
Yeah, that's open-ended for me, and I don't have any names in particular because I don't know which side of the ball he identifies with most. And I think there's positives to not knowing that because clearly he came from a team that was strong on both sides. So it's not as easily identifiable, especially because he's not like a Mike D'Antoni type of coach that's been around for decades on decades, and you know he identifies with one side versus the other. So I'm curious, especially once his opportunity to speak with media comes up, him kind of letting us know whether intentionally or not what side he's going to be identifying with. And then I'm hoping to see a contrast from the coaches that he ultimately brings into his brain trust to create some balance from that particular faction of the team. So if he's defense, that's cool. Find some offensive coaches to bring around him that are going to also be progressive and evolved in the lens that they look at and assess offense from. If it's vice versa, that's cool. Then find defensive pieces to insulate him there.
Yeah, I agree. I don't know specific names for sure, but I will say if you're able to pull off the Johnny Bryant thing as well, I know a lot of people floated getting both of them. I think now Bryant is the favorite to land the New York Knicks job. And you do wonder as well, and this is maybe something else, Steven, you do wonder if Jordan Ott wasn't the choice for the Phoenix Suns, but it actually was Johnny Bryant. But Johnny Bryant would prefer to go to what a lot would consider a better situation in New York with the Knicks, and plus a place that he spent time there as well. So you do wonder if Jordan Ott was the first choice, and if Johnny Bryant turned it down. But if Johnny Bryant can stay an associate head coach and move to Phoenix, it doesn't feel like an upgrade from what he's doing in Cleveland, or of course being a head coach, you take the head coaching job, but that would be an ultimate win to walk away with both of these guys. But on that note, Steven, do you feel like that would undermine Jordan Ott a little bit if Johnny Bryant was also on staff?
I don't feel like it would undermine. I think it would be a cosign to the alignment and continuity bit that they continue to speak to. Having two coaches like we talked about yesterday that have experience in a successful manner with the Cleveland Cavaliers, being able to take a lot of the things that they learned under Kenny Atkinson's tutelage and apply that in their own situation and scenario, I feel like would be positive. Again, to have a head coach that has experience with one of his assistant coaches in recent fashion that resulted in a historic type of season that the Cavs did, to be able to bring that into the Suns context and hit the ground running will be sensational for the franchise.
Yeah, I do wonder if there is something about giving a new head coach a completely clean slate and not feeling like there's competition there. Because think about with Frank Vogel, you keep on the top two candidates, Kevin Young and Frank Vogel, and you'd make Kevin Young the highest paid assistant coach in the NBA, a couple $1 million a year. And I'm not saying that there was a problem with that, but it does, in theory, create a pretty interesting dynamic. Would you want David Fizdale back on the staff next year?
I don't know if it's as a coach or if it's as like a consultant in some capacity. I want him around. I don't know if I necessarily would like to see him on the coaching staff in particular that's sitting on the bench every game. I would like, if you're talking about all of this change, why not give Jordan Ott the opportunity to maybe handpick most, if not all, of his assistants? Who's going to better know how to capitalize off of or be a contrast to his approach than him himself? All assistant coaches in the league talk, and they have a ton of relationships and networking that's been established, to your point, since 2012 for him in particular. So why not allow for him to choose from pieces that he might see as fits to the system and the principles that he's hoping to establish? That way you can kind of, again, hit the ground running and not be trying to learn each other while doing so.
Yeah, I think I would like David Fizdale back. I don't think that that's necessarily a threatening assistant coach to have for Jordan Ott. There is an established relationship with the players, which is what Fizdale is very, very good at. That's his strength. Obviously, taking Bull under his wing. You imagine a big reason why David Fizdale was even involved in the final round of Suns coaching search, or at least reportedly was because of the fact that he had such great relationship with players, and you assume Devin Booker is among those players as well. I think being around the franchise is fine. I wouldn't be heartbroken if he was no longer around the franchise, but everything that I've heard about him, he's a great guy. He's a great coach. He's great at player development and player relations. I don't want him being your lead assistant. I didn't want him being your head coach, but being around to me is a net positive for this team as well. What about Tom Thibodeau? You want Tom Thibodeau as an assistant coach in Phoenix, Steven?
I think Tom's days as an assistant are long gone. If he's not head coaching, I just don't think he's going to be
old,
coaching.
though, man. He's almost 70. Maybe he wants to retire in Phoenix, but keep his foot in the game a little bit. Be your defensive-minded head coach who doesn't get any of the blame because you're not actually picking the rotations.
I mean, if he was open to it, I would be all for it, because that's someone that has a ton of experience in a championship winning fashion and successful fashion over the course of decades now at this point. I just don't see that in his cards, but I will say with Tibbs, the fact the merits that he was fired off of, at least that we've been made aware of, the optics do not look good in any capacity. You have a coach that just far exceeded expectations, came within games of being in the finals for your franchise that hasn't been there in over 20 years. And the ultimate decision is days after that to fire him. And you saw the reactions that Jalen Brunson had to certain questions that were being asked. Like, I don't know. That's a whole nother topic, but I just don't know what it takes to sustain and to keep your job as a head coach in this modern NBA. And the fact that there's ambiguity with that, even if it results in wins that exceed expectations, that puts everybody else on walking on eggshells as far as their job security. There's only 3 coaches in the league that have been around for numerous seasons now. And that's Eric Spoelstra, Steve Kerr, and I think the other name is Billy Donovan.
Is that really it?
Look around.
I mean, Billups has been in Portland for a couple of years.
Yeah. It's been like 2 seasons for Chauncey up there.
And 2 seasons for Chauncey. Missoula's been a couple seasons. Obviously, Udoka, 2 seasons.
But that'll span past like 2 or 3 seasons.
Ty Lue.
So there's 4 names.
Yeah.
Out of 30 teams.
I mean, but it's funny. You think about a lot of them. There's been head coaching changes relatively recently.
Exactly.
Yeah. Mark says Billy Donovan, 3rd longest tenured head coach in the NBA.
Exactly.
Wow. I mean, talk about something special cooking up there for CHGO, man. Your Bulls, I mean, just in a great spot, Steven. Love it. Optical Illusion saying Mike Budenholzer for assistant coach. Again, Jordan Ott comes from the Mike Budenholzer coaching tree, Steven.
He does. That's all I got to say on that one.
Nathan says, I don't get why we got rid of Coach Bud. I like this guy, though. We wouldn't have this problem if we kept the guy who led us to the finals. Okay. Want to summarize why we got rid of Coach Bud, Steven?
I mean, just look at the record. The record says everything. Again, it's not specific to Coach, but the fact that he wasn't able to uphold the principles that made him successful with the Bucks, while also not generating buy-in from the top end of the roster, while also rubbing people the wrong way within all of that, as far as that goes and what's been reported, that's enough to not get you another opportunity after your first season.
Yeah. Okay, let's wrap things up here let's do a grade. Give me a grade for the Phoenix Suns hiring Jordan Ott to be their next head coach, their 4th in as many years.
It's a B for me. And I don't think there was any option out there that would have gave them, for me, anything higher than a B. I said I was content, and that's what that is for me. So I would give it a solid B. Obviously, with a ton of room to improve or go the other direction based off of how things progress going forward.
We have former producer Noah in the chat saying hot is higher, hashtag Michigan for life, and then also adding an MSU A+. So Phoenix Suns B is an MSU A+. Let's read off some other grades from the chat. Kev with a B. Bees says B for sure. AZ Soldier 520, B+. Wow Factor, C+. Optical Illusion, B-. Terran, C. Wow. J-Lord Jonesy 19, F. Ted says incomplete grade. Jay says B. Durantula says F for fired next season. Wow Factor says C+. I'm skeptical. CJ says F-. Wow. Mario Not Bros, C+. Meatloaf says I give an E for everyone. Mark says basically a C for me. F, B. Okay. I'm going to give this a B-. I'm cautiously optimistic about what Jordan Ott can do with the Suns. And I would not have said that he was in my top 5 coaching candidates that I wanted for the Suns. Chris Quinn, Johnny Bryant, Sam Cassell, Royal Ivey, Mike Inori, even Dave Bliss. These are all names that I would have preferred for the Suns to hire. That being said, this is not a Brian Gregory hire. This is not a bad hire. I don't think this is solely rooted in the Michigan State ties. I think it's part of it. So a B- is what I end up with. Yes. What
I can't wait to assess is the front office come like August or September. That's what I'm really looking forward to giving a grade for, because I feel like that's going to be what ultimately either helps or goes up against the ceiling or floor of Jordan Ott in his first season as a Suns head coach.
Yeah, we have Devin Ott, one of our diehards in the chat, says, Eric, as a person who only watches basketball during the postseason, is this guy good? We don't really know. I mean, he's coached on good teams. He's been wanted around the league, but I wouldn't say that he was a top 5 candidate for me.
He's been good in his assistant coaching role, but that's very different from being a head coach. So
yeah.
To your point, all the way at the beginning, we just don't know enough to say whether it's sensational or just bad or okay.
Yeah, Ted says it is a Gregory hire. He's responsible for the final two. Yeah, this is you know what, Steven? This is the first major sticking point that will be on Brian Gregory's resume. Will be Jordan Ott hired as head coach. But there's more. We've got a Kevin Durant trade that feels like it's more and more imminent every single day, a potential Devin Booker extension. What are they going to do with Bradley Beal? And of course, the NBA draft is this month, Steven. This month, the 25th. And guess what? Later today at 3, we're going to be talking about potential targets the Suns could trade up, especially with that number 10 pick and snag in the draft. Plus, we'll be picking up the pieces on the Phoenix Suns hiring Jordan Ott. So make sure you hit that like button. Make sure you hit that subscribe button. We will be in studio at 3 p.m. So set your calendars for that. Make sure you're subbed, notifications on. We have everything else here on PHNX Sports. We have coverage of the Diamondbacks that are in the middle of the season, Mercury that are in the middle of the season, off-season coverage for Cardinals, ASU, U of A, and Espo. If you're missing Espo, just started up a live version of Southwest Bias. That's right. It's in fact live right now. He'll be talking about the coaching hire and plenty of other things over 30 minutes every single Monday through Friday at 11 a.m. Book it. Southwest Bias with Espo. So head on over there after this. We appreciate all of you being here with us. We will be back at 3 p.m. In the meantime, try not to freak out too much about the Michigan State stuff. We'll talk to you all later today.
We all silly like the mayor.